Hello and welcome to Menopausal Magnificent Me and
the not quite so mental, equally menopausal, equally magnificent mate.
and we have decided to do some podcasts. Are they podcasts? Vodcasts?
Podcast,
Blogs?
video,
Ugh,
the podcast
who
with
knows?
video.
Who knows? Anyway, we're going to have a chat and a brew
Cheers.
to that. And just talk through bits of my story and what's happened over the last 3 years.
Yeah,
That's the deal, isn't it?
let's go for it.
We shall let's start with when I had the realisation at home, and obviously wanted to let you know that I thought I had the answer. Well, I did have the answer to what had been going on for 3 years. Did I phone you?
No. You just you were coming for the weekend.
So it wasn't a special visit.
Oh,
sorry.
No,
Not even a special trip.
No, you didn't make any effort at all. if in my memory, you definitely didn't bring prosecco and
You
lots
definitely
of
didn't
snacks.
bake.
Definitely not. No, nothing special about our visits ever. Yeah. No, it's just a very ordinary weekend.
Yes,
very
and I
ordinary.
remember sitting on this sofa.
Yeah.
And then me saying to you, I've got a question, and you only either say yes or no, none of your waffle or faff.
Rude.
And I said,
like, when do I ever waffle?
See, and I said, do you think I'm autistic? And you said,
no.
And I said, okay, how about when I do this and 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 this, and listed like 200 things.
Yeah. Well, I think at that point, I'd kind of, well, you also said to me, okay, why did you say no? And I said, well, because you said I could only say yes or no and put me on the spot and I had to answer immediately. And it had just never occurred to me. I think, for some context, Claire and I have been best friends for 30 plus years since university. And I've just always liked Claire and accepted her for who she was. I rather enjoy her quirks and her ways of doing things. So it had never occurred to me for 1 minute that they were because of anything else other than it just being Claire. This is just Claire. So when you put me on the spot and you made me answer with one word, I can't think why you think I waffle. That was it. It was no. But then, like you say, when you said you started to list the things and point them out, I started to see what, it just became clearer and clearer.
Yeah, and I think we just talked and talked for hours.
Yeah.
After that, didn't we?
We did.
And still, like 4 weeks later, there's still a lot of how many phone calls a day.
Oh, goodness me.
And how many messages as we're working through this, trying to work through it together.
Yeah.
As things come up, and it's like, oh, look, I've just found this out about me. We're just learning all the time, aren't we? Still, is that every day is a school day.
Yeah. I mean, we sat that day, and we were sat here on the sofa, and we talked and talked and talked, and I was kind of, it had blowing my mind, and I think it had only literally been the day before for you. So just what had gone through your mind? How had that process taken you to the point where you sat on the sofa and asked me?
Well, because I'd written all those things down on my sofa, it was so obvious to me that that's what it was. That obviously I needed to tell you that's what it was and get your opinion on it. But I knew that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I knew you'd understand and you'd get it. Yeah. I just knew it was going to take time, coming from 3 years of being lost and not knowing what the heck was going on. Yeah. Suddenly me being like high as a kite, and I've like my eureka epiphany moment, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Like I was up on the ceiling, wasn't I? My mood.
Well, and it came off the back of a month where things hadn't been good. You'd had another sort of
well, I wasn't working.
Yeah.
I'd had to cancel my South America holiday. Yeah. Dream holiday, bucket list holiday for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
All because I'd been in recovery.
Yeah, in that recovery period.
Yeah.
So you'd been like that, and then to turn up on my doorstep and to get this version of you who was just I'm here, it was incredible. And we just sat and talked, and we walked into town, and we talked some more, and the following day we went to the beach,
Mm.
and which was lovely, our favorite little spot. And we walked and walked and talked and talked. And I say it was just that cathartic process for you of just being able to talk, because it was the first time in 3 years that you have openly discussed what those 3 years have been like for you.
Yeah, because nobody's asked me about it, and nobody's spoken to me about it, and I understand that, and I think that comes from a place of fear or worrying that I'm gonna go into a relapse, or it's going to upset me in some way, or so I've had all this in me for 3 years, but I've had no outlet for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the professionals couldn't hear what I was saying. I knew all along it was wrong. I knew I was on the wrong medication. I knew I wasn't depressed. I knew I wasn't psychotic. I knew all of this, but nobody heard it because it was easier for them to believe that I was, and for them to medicate me accordingly, than to actually look for a different answer, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, speaking from a perspective of your friend in all of that, we just didn't know what the hell was going on, and it was scary, and it was frightening for everybody, and it was just, we just didn't understand it and just didn't have a clue. And you trust the professionals. You put your trust, we put our trust in those professionals who were coming to, we needed help. I didn't recognize you. You weren't my Claire. You weren't, you weren't you. So who would you become? We needed help figuring that out. And then you do, and then along the way you trust the people who are the professionals who are working with you. But I think, I guess from my perspective, the not talking about it for 3 years, there's always been that option to talk about it, but it hasn't. You're right. You don't push it. We spoke a little bit about it, and I've been able to tease little bits out of you, but you haven't wanted to delve deep because there hasn't been that understanding.
And because I was still in it.
Yeah, you were still in it.
And I think it's only once I'm out of it, because I thought that was permanent and that was going to be forever, and that was going to be my life. And it was only now, when I had that realization, and now I'm out of it, is it okay to talk about it? And it's cathartic and very healing and soothing to talk about it. But at that moment, for the 3 years, I couldn't talk about it because I was in it and living it, and that was my life, and that felt like that was going to be forever, didn't it, at that point?
And because you just didn't know what was going on, you didn't have the answers, so you couldn't talk about it.
I couldn't explain what it was to people. That's it. Yeah. So
it was that weekend was a lot of talking,
a lot of gin,
possibly, but you shared, you were able to share experiences that what had gone on for you in those 3 years, and some of which were things that we didn't know about. So which I know you'll be talking about in your book in more detail. But yeah, it was a hard listen. It was difficult to hear, but also equally incredible, because there you are, just living and answering these questions, and to see the difference in you, and to just hear the light and the joy in you, and you were just alive, and you could see it all just making sense and clicking in. And what a joy to be with you during that time.
So then when I left on the Monday, and I dropped this bombshell, and we talked it through for 72 hours, but then I had to go back to my life and you had to go back to work. How did it then sit with you? Do you then, I mean, I was still processing it myself, so it takes weeks, it takes years, it probably take the rest of our lives. But how did it feel then when I left you with that?
Well, I mean, it had blown my mind, and frankly, I was exhausted. Because there was so much to try and process. And you went, and I just remember sort of just going, oh my God.
It felt like I'd been run over.
I did feel like I'd been hit. I'd been hit by a Claire-sized truck. Oh dear.
What's it like having a neurodivergent friend?
I'm not really up for it, if I'm honest. A little bit overrated. Gonna have the quiet
Interview
one back.
over.
Anyway, cheers.
Cheers.